good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Kevin Stevenson. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of I Don't Care with, of course, me, Dr. Kevin Stevenson. My guest and I have quite a bit in common, but we were just talking before recording about the weather in our various locations. Me in Central Texas and Julia Rehman in Abu Dhabi. Surprisingly enough, our temperatures are very similar. Central Texas today will be at about 105, and I think Abu Dhabi may have us beaten by 4 or 5 degrees, but I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. So, as I said today, my guest is Dr. Julia Raymond. Julia and I met when I participated in ACHU, the Southwest Coffee with the C-Suite a while back. And we've had some really interesting conversations since then. She's an internationally recognized healthcare executive focused on health data governance, AI, and digital transformation. So, Julia, welcome to I Don't Care. And tell my audience a little bit more about you and obviously about the heat that you're experiencing over there in Abu Dhabi.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Kevin. I have about 18 years of healthcare experience. And like you said, I kind of sit at that intersection of data, technology, and operational strategy. And my passion, one of the things you and I talked about is my passion is those rural and underserved communities. So I've worked in a lot of different capacities within healthcare, starting out as a data scientist for Express Scripts and then ending up in Bangalore, India, leading a team for a commercial launch for IQVIA. That was very exciting. And then back to the States where ACHE of the Southwest was became my chapter in New Mexico. So I worked for a fully integrated healthcare system in New Mexico as the senior manager, interim director for delivery system analytics, and then graduated to a academic medical center in Denver, Colorado, UC Health, and then again the call came to come back overseas. So I spent almost a year in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for Ministry of National Guard and being their director of data science and clinical strategy. And then came to Abu Dhabi, initially working for Department of Health in as the director of their analytics and reporting for their government programs. And I've been here now in Abu Dhabi for almost 3 years. Now I'm doing a lot of my own consulting and both in the States and in the Middle East. And yes, the weather is very hot here. And surprisingly, I think because we're near the ocean, I think I mentioned to you the humidity is very high.
You mentioned that it was just like Houston, so my Texas friends know exactly how that feels.
Yeah.
Uh, so let's jump into it. Gosh, everybody's talking about AI. I just got back from a conference yesterday on population health, and AI was fully integrated into that. But very few people are really talking about AI leadership.
Mhm.
So, do you think healthcare is in danger of focusing on the technology while ignoring the culture that is required to make it successful?
We do have a risk of that happening. That's why you need to always make sure there is a human in the loop when it comes to making decisions. And I know we always say, and I'm sure your mentors have said it to you, sometimes are too much in love with the problem and aren't looking for a simple solution. And I think
Mhm.
AI in some ways can fill that gap. And instead of running the risk of let's have AI work on everything, start small and do something simple. Um,
Mhm.
I think as executives, administrators, leaders, the easiest way to feel comfortable with AI is very first, look at what tool can solve a problem that you're consistently having to make. Like in well, most anywhere around the world, if staffing is your biggest issue, if readmission is your biggest
Mhm.
issue, if bed capacity is your biggest issue, focus on something that keeps you up at night and see if there's an AI
Yeah.
solution that can help you with that and not take over the decision for you, but
Mhm.
help you make a better decision, surfacing things that maybe you didn't even think of that are in your underlying data and your underlying
Okay.
operations.
Well, that makes sense. Well, and you and I both share a passion for rural
Yes.
healthcare. Um, and I've talked to some of my friends who are leaders in rural healthcare, and they say, we really have to advance the adoption of AI in our organizations because they've got limited resources, whether it be physical resources or human capital.
Yes.
They have to be
Yeah.
as efficient as possible. So what do you see, give my audience a couple of tips from a rural perspective on how can they better utilize AI and advance the adoption?
I think always a human in the loop is the first thing. Also, you're not going to have the large amount of staff and support that you do maybe here at a large system here
Mhm,
in Abu Dhabi or a large system where I came from in University of Colorado. So if you have a smaller system,
mhm,
you're a lot leaner. So I think even more AI becomes important for you to help manage your risks. I think the AI adoption is spot on, and I'm glad to hear that we're having this conversation. I would
mhm,
say for leaders in rural health, again, it goes back to look at the decisions that you're having to make on a daily basis that take your time that AI can help
yeah,
support you with, and use it as a decision support tool. I mean,
mhm,
unfortunately, in rural health systems, you're going to have to look at, do we really need 40 people on staff when I hate to oversimplify, but when four will do? And having the
yeah,
data, having the AI to support that. Um, I think the
mhm,
biggest thing for leaders is to make sure that your frontline staff or the people that are going to be responsible for using the tool are brought in even before the purchase has been made, the decision has been bought,
mhm,
and their input is there. Because we all know you're given a tool, and if it's not useful, if you haven't been trained, if you haven't been consulted, you're
mhm,
so busy taking care of patients or you're so busy doing your daily work, someone's going to find a workaround to your AI in a week, and then what have
yeah,
you done? You've spent money on
right.
something that's not useful.
No, I agree with you there because I know in past hospitals, we certainly had to do that, or we felt like we had to do that to maintain the level of patient care that we needed to do. So you've worked in healthcare organizations all around the world.
Mhm.
Do you find that we're really facing very different challenges country to country, or are we basically struggling with the same thing?
We're basically struggling with the same things. I started out in healthcare even earlier. I was a junior volunteer in high school. And it's like I don't even see I see the same issues still are there. And I think it doesn't matter where I've been in the world. I think healthcare it's a global issue and a local one. We all are facing the same challenges. We're all humans, have the same diseases.
Mhm,
Um, and hospitals have a lot of standards of care, patient safety, quality that so there's a
mhm,
lot of similarities. The patient demographics may be different, the funding might be different. There are some cultural nuances depending where you are, even in the states, going from one state to
mhm.
another.
Sure.
And how families interact, how patients interact, and the unique local issues. But I would say we're all basically the same. And I think if you apply the same logic and thought process when you're adopting AI, the first question is who owns the tool outright that this decision is meant to
Mhm,
support? And in a rural system, it could be the same person that answers the same three questions. Who owns the tool? Um, what is the
mhm,
escalation path if it's determined that the AI made the wrong decision or it's not clinically sound what it's doing, to make sure that once you've bought that tool and it's working, you're going to have oversight. You're going to have to make sure, is it making the right
mhm,
decision? Is it clinically sound? Looking for that drift. What is the escalation path for that? And then, at the end of the day, who is it helping? Who is it serving? So those are the questions.
mhm.
Who owns it? How do we escalate it? And then how do we ensure that there's an audit trail, there's a way to maintain it, and then if it's not useful, how do we go about adjusting it?
A lot of my colleagues say, that they're data driven,
Mhm.
but so many of them, I've seen. use data as an excuse to avoid making those difficult decisions. What do you think about that?
Garbage in, garbage out. I know I'm sure you've had many guests who've said that. I
Mhm.
mean, the AI tool, your dashboards, your EMR system, it's only as good as the quality of the data that's been put in there. And also, um, there's always a risk for bias. That's what we have to check with anything.
Mhm.
There's bias in AI, there's bias in how models are built. I would say it does it does support you if you're risk averse. I just would want to know from that person, what is the data telling them, and are they are they put, presenting the data in such a way that it supports their decision, but it's not in a neutral way. Did they already put their
Mhm.
bias in there with the data? But I've found very seasoned leaders, they'll say, I go with my gut and my gut says this. And
Yeah.
I would agree, there's a lot of times when the data is right, or if the data doesn't show it, understand what is it that they still feel uncomfortable with. So yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say folks say they're data driven, but there's often a lot of controversy about the data is wrong, XY, that's something that's
Yeah.
always said too. So I take people at face value, and then it's always good to unpack, because a lot of time the human perspective, it's so useful. An AI tool can also surface things, but then the person in the room who really is close to the patients, close to the work,
Mhm.
I'd like them to poke holes into that before we implement something. And I think that makes a better, then the AI, then the data, everything is useful. Poke holes into it. What's wrong with it? Do we need to adjust?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I've learned just in my utilization of different AI tools, that AI is great for aggregating facts,
Mhm.
but it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have that, that human touch to it. And you brought something up that kinda made me chuckle about the executives that make the gut calls, and I was pretty good at that because of the level and breadth of my experience over the years. But, and I must admit every now and then I would say, "Yeah, the data's wrong." But I think you have to measure everything in the environment, the data, the culture of your organization, your knowledge of the community, your knowledge of the medical staff, the patients, your clinicians, your caregivers,
Mm.
and then make the decision based upon that. Um, when you boil it down, healthcare is a people business. Honestly, it's not necessarily a numbers business. It's a business about people. And I'm afraid a lot of our organizations have forgotten that. They are so focused on metrics that they forget about the people and about the reason why people come to us. And it's because they're at the most vulnerable times of their lives. And so anyway, I'll get off that
No,
soapbox.
I agree.
So you recently said that health data is no longer infrastructure, it's strategy. That's pretty profound. So what are CEOs missing about the strategic value of data?
It's very easy to always, like we were just talking about, to say the data is wrong,
Mhm,
or, oh, we don't capture that, or we don't understand that, or, oh, we don't worry about that. Using it as a reporting tool is great, but using it to drive your strategy is much more meaningful.
mhm,
And understanding we're
mhm,
very data rich and very insights poor, and that comes with making
mm,
sure the right people are in analytics, make sure the right people are in informatics, make sure that you identify people within your system that maybe they're a frontline person, but they're really interested in the data. You can cross train them to help surface those things where data can help drive the strategy. I think
mhm,
there's so much data that we're using, it becomes an afterthought of having that drive strategy, when you're just like, grow, grow, grow. How do we generate more revenue instead of containing costs? And I think now the conversations are going to be, let's use our data to drive those strategies. And I think
Mhm.
gone are the days now where leaders can not be the owners and stewards of their own data, which is why governance is also important. Something else I would dare say, when someone says the data is wrong, one of the important things is that data point needs an owner that is not IT, that is not a technical person,
Yeah.
that is someone who knows that measure and who can speak to it. And if it is incorrect, how do we adjust for it?
You hit on something I was just thinking about, whenever I said that I did a lot of things on gut, but my gosh, I use the data in my particular data set that I really loved was patient data, referral data. Where are our patients coming from? Who's sending those patients? Which physicians are caring for those patients, and things like that. And so you're right. I mean, I knew that data backwards and forwards, even as the COO of a hospital. And so, in a lot of meetings, my president would look over at me for a number because he knew I knew it. I had it in my head. And so I definitely own those numbers. Now the financials numbers, I let the CFO deal with that. I did, that wasn't necessarily my area. But starting my career on the business development side, hey, I was about the growth, and I wanted to know, hey, what do we need to do to grow? What do we need to better serve our patients? And so I really, like you said, I took full ownership of that data. So let's talk about governance, data governance, AI governance, and so if I walked into 10 hospital meetings or hospital board meetings tomorrow, how many of those do you think are truly prepared to govern AI and data instead of simply approving just another technology purchase?
I would say right now, just I think I've read a few places. Don't I wouldn't say quote me on this, but this is a good question. I know in some of our ACHE discussions and some of the other conferences I've seen, I believe it's like maybe 20-30% are really truly
Yeah.
ready. And that comes, I know we say AI, but even when it comes to any sort of new technology or
Mhm.
tool, having that governance there, it's a struggle. And I think health systems are doing a good job at understanding they need to manage it, but I think they need a little bit more guidance. I think that's where places like Chai and all these data governance tools come in handy. It's where there's frameworks developed for how governance works. And I think that kind of readiness is going to be useful, as I know I'm sure you hear it too. Everyone's like, "Oh, we're implementing AI now," which is great. I'm glad to hear that
Mhm.
people say that. And at least sometimes it's a scribe or it's something that already comes with their EMR like
Yeah.
Epic. But at least people sound proud that they're implementing AI. Now whether people know what that means or not, it's is a question. I think we as leaders that also happen to use technology, we also need to do a better job of really being the standard bearer of here's how it needs to work
Mhm.
and rely on our organizations and participate in those to make sure we do have the right frameworks and the right governance
Yeah.
and have a standard that all health systems can implement nationally, internationally, what have you.
Mhm.
Because
Okay.
um, I think it should just automatically be a part of your, again, your strategy, the
Mhm.
infrastructure of your system as data becomes more and more rich and healthcare being regulated, keeping up with all of those things.
Mhm.
If you don't have that in place, I mean, you can see where we can definitely get ahead of ourselves with all these AI tools without even understanding what they do, how you deal with them once the vendor is gone, and how do you manage it?
Mhm.
How do you manage drift? How do you, again, just like a data set, like how you owned that referral data, who owns that tool? And I
Yeah.
think it becomes an afterthought because at the end of the day, the focus is patient care. But if we have this baked in, I think it's going to start becoming the norm, especially as they say, if AI is going to take off the way that they say, the way they claim.
one of the things when you step into a hospital boardroom and you look at those board members, most of them don't have healthcare backgrounds.
Mhm,
You know, you've got a lot of the large systems that have very brilliant and accomplished people,
mhm,
but they don't have healthcare backgrounds. Then you look at maybe a critical access hospital out in, let's just say, West Texas. You may have and wonderful people, well-meaning people, people who care, but they don't have that healthcare lens. What kind of information can a hospital CEO impart to their board members to help them be more comfortable with AI governance?
I think just like anything, there's always that risk for you don't want to talk to them about the risk for litigation if you're blindly trusting it, and how governance also keeps it in check, and also make sure you get a return on your investment, that it's useful. 6 months from now, you know, look how
Yeah,
quickly things change and new tools come aboard. So I would say, talking about the return on investment to a board, make the board comfortable that, um, the correct people are governing the tool, managing the tool, and at the end of the day, the CEO goes to the board and says, "Ultimately, I'm answerable for up the escalation chain." So, ultimately, the buck stops with the main leader, but
yeah.
making sure that there's the governance committee, the right people are there, and there's always that communication channel up to the board of what's happening with the governance committees, and making sure the
Yeah.
right people are on that committee.
Well, and that's true. Making sure that you've got the right people, even on the board committees, making sure that you have people who may have an elevated interest or
Mhm.
capacity for AI and for its leadership. Okay, let's shift to something else. I mean, you've built this international career connecting leaders across continents.
Mhm.
So, what's one lesson that American healthcare executives should learn from the rest of the world, and what's one thing the rest of the world gets right that we don't?
I think the one thing that I've learned here is make sure this place, because you're answerable to ministers, you're answerable to the government. It's a very top down environment, but we also have a really good infrastructure, so we're a little bit more free to um, pilot new things, try new things, and try and be as innovative as possible while still, making it the goal of taking care of patients. I think,
Mhm,
um, supporting that innovation within your organization, whether it's trying things within your organization or encouraging them to join communities where they can try that, like the American College of Health Data Management, or CHI for, you know, sustainable AI. There's work groups you can join. So encouraging your people to learn more and bring it back. We do that a lot
mhm,
here. That I think that's one thing in the States that, they could definitely learn from it. There's a lot of encouragement of innovation, trying new things and new ideas, but it's in a
mhm.
much more controlled support system. And then fail and fail fast. So I think that's also,
Yeah.
they're trying a lot of different things in very controlled environments, and a lot of simulations and a lot of synthetic data and a lot of trials before they do something, but they've got a whole incubation system here that supports that. I think that's something that, um, states could definitely learn from. It doesn't have to necessarily go all the way up to the federal level, but states, metro areas, your government
Mhm.
helping helping encourage that, because obviously hospital health system is a big part of the community, and you're then supporting your
Yeah.
community in a safe way. And then I would say the one thing we could definitely learn here, um, from the States is there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of decisions being made, there's a lot of, future building, a lot of smart hospital, a lot of great things that are forward looking. Um, I think in the States, we do a slightly better job of always making sure the word patient is in the conversation. Here, it's more
Mhm.
implied, but I think sometimes hearing the word patient in a conversation and how does it help the patient is something that I think that we need to remind ourselves of here.
You know what? You're the second guest I've had on the last couple of weeks who have talked about the need for American healthcare to be more pro innovation and to fail
Yep.
fast. Um, here we go, soapbox time again. American healthcare is becoming more and more focused solely on the bottom line. And it's not and there's still some well-meaning mission-based organizations, but so many have pivoted to, we're in this to make a lot of money. And I'm saying this about not-for-profit healthcare systems
Yeah.
too. You know, recently, two large Catholic system leaders have come out saying that they expect an EBITDA of between 8.5 to 10%, which is just, I mean, that you might as well say, "Hey, I'm a for-profit entity," because that's what, my for-profit days, we were looking at numbers at that level and obviously a little bit higher. When back in here we go, start sounding old again. Back in the day in the on the not-for-profit side, if our margin was 1 to 3%, that was great. And I know things have changed. I know things are a lot more expensive. I know, certainly the cost of labor is more expensive, drugs are more expensive. But we are I'm really afraid we're starting to forget the patient. And I think we need to get back to that in however way that we can. So that leads me into my next question. Healthcare's never had more data and more dashboards and more predictive analytics and all that. But I'm telling you, my colleagues are burning out at a rapid rate, and costs are continuing to rise, and patients again feel disconnected. So, are we measuring the wrong things?
I think so. It's like you said, we're looking at profits over
Yeah.
people, and we talk about safety, near miss, etc. When you're burned out, how are you able to bring your best self and
Mhm.
take care of your patient? And you can make a simple mistake that you wouldn't make normally,
Yeah.
and it's a real issue, and I think to your point, I mean, yes, we definitely need to measure profit. Yes, we definitely I mean, in order to stay
Sure.
open, clearly, you have to be able to pay your bills and all of that. But,
Yeah. No margin, no mission. I
yeah.
get that. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I dare say I do feel that it's possible we're measuring the wrong things. We say, "Oh, clinicians are burnt
Mhm.
out, nurses are doctors are burnt out, nurses are burnt out." Yeah, we've been saying that for years. What are we doing about it? And I think
Mhm.
the pandemic surfaced it even more, and then we're moving on like it didn't happen, and people are still feeling the effects of what they had to do during that, and look how many people left the health system. So I think
Mhm.
addressing addressing burnout, addressing mental health of our care workers, of people workforce safety, preventing
Mhm.
workforce violence. I think those are the things that not just measure, how do we address those and how can AI help with that? Again, it goes
Yeah.
to something simple that you do every day, a decision you have to make every day. Like, let's say it's a decision a clinician has to make every day. How can we at least surface it? So here's the decision
Mhm.
he or she has to make. And then, what are the recommendations after that? Where they can clearly override it, but these routine decisions they have to make, it's also gonna help them
Mhm.
with burnout, and it's not always like, "Oh, it'll help with
Yeah.
burnout, and then they can see more patients." Well, if you're already at capacity, you're seeing 22 patients a day as a provider, and then someone walks in the room and says, "Oh, well, to be profitable or to," you're gonna have to see
Yeah.
27. How is that gonna be possible without sacrificing care to those other patients, and then
Yeah.
also burning out the clinician. They're in such a rush, there could be something that they miss. And then again, they have to
Oh,
worry about hospital admissions that maybe in an office visit they could have caught.
No, you're exactly right there. I agree with you. Okay, last question. I like to think out in the future, 5, 10, 20 years. So let's think about 5 years from now. What should CEOs be doing today that they're probably putting off to tomorrow that's going to greatly impact their organizations 5 years down the road?
Getting your data and your governance in the right place in the very beginning and start
Mhm.
now. And I know it sounds like it's such a data leaning thing, but if every decision you make, we say, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. I would say
Mhm.
taking a really good look and making sure the right people are available to make sure your data infrastructure is sound. You have quality data to make the right decisions. And if there's things are missing, quickly fix those gaps because all of us in the field say that, AI is another tool in your toolbox. It's not going to fix all your problems. If your data,
Yeah.
if your infrastructure, if the infrastructure of your building is not sound, what's going to happen? The
Mhm.
data needs to be
Mhm.
seen in the same way. And you've got to be able to, I would say, CEO, invest in that now and just make sure it's solid and sound because the next thing will be coming. First, it's AI, next, it'll be quantum
Mhm.
computing. I mean, quantum computing is already here, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably going to be the next big thing. And then after that, we're going to have to be agile because look at how quickly technology is moving faster than we can catch up with it
Mhm.
and making sure that foundation is there. And again, always make sure
Mhm.
everything you're doing is patient centric. And that's where your health information management folks come into light, your
Yeah.
nurse informaticists, your chief medical
Mhm.
information officer, making sure everything we do is patient first because it's one thing we do very well in the States and I really hope we don't lose that. It's something that does make us
Yeah.
unique, I feel.
I agree. Well, Julia, it's been a real pleasure having you on. I don't care today. We've covered a lot, and your expertise in data and AI was certainly came through. So appreciate it. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, Dr. Julia Rehman, I think, you heard a lot of really good content today about AI and data governance. Take it to heart and start. If you're not focusing on it now, you probably need to start as soon as possible. So, with that, I'm Dr. Kevin Stevenson. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of I Don't Care with me, Dr. Kevin Stevenson, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.